Hello and welcome back to my Game Grid toy box for our next episode of Toy Box Tutorials. We're building a little mission for Mickey to help us understand how some new Creativitoys work. And Mickey's world has been transformed into a video game, and he needs to hack into a computer in order to shut it down and restore his world. And so far we've set up this ability terminal that Mickey can hack in order to lower a force field that's protecting the remote controller over here. And I showed you last time how to use the remote controller to move a townsperson like Clue around a digital maze that we built. And today we're going to implement the logic for what happens when Clue reaches the end of the maze. I played through this little mission back in episode 88, and you'll remember, if you saw that when Clue reaches the end of the maze, which is this red square here, where this trigger area is sitting on it, when Clue reaches this point, it shuts down the computer and restores Mickey's world. There are two toys that we need in order to restore the world and make that happen. The first one is a sky changer, and you find that once again in the Instant Toys drawer. We looked at this episode once already, way back at the beginning of the series, in episode 3. However, we never looked at the logic connections for it because we weren't ready for that yet. But we're going to do that today. Now the other toy that we need is in the Creativitoys drawer, and it's the Theme Transformer, and that's the main topic for today's lesson. This is a new toy that was introduced in Disney Infinity 3.0, so you will not find too many tutorials for this toy online. So hopefully this video will help you because of that. But once again, you find this toy in the Creativitoys drawer once you've purchased it from the toy store. And I'm also going to put down a button temporarily that we can use to check out the behaviors for that. Alright, the Theme Transformer allows you to dynamically change the styles of other toys with a logic connection. So you can change, as we've showed way back in episode 3, you can change a lot of things with the styling menu. And I've shown that along through the series. So looking at the menu in the lower right corner, you can invoke the styling menu with the X on my Wii U, and that brings up this list of styles. You also have the same thing for the customizable plants in the plants drawer, which are these fantasy terrain pieces. You have them for the basic building blocks and many, many other things. And you can use this Theme Transformer to change them on the fly. And before we look at this toy, I need to point out that the list of choices that are going to be available in this toy will differ depending on whether you are in an exterior toy box like ours or you're in an interior toy box. And we haven't talked about the interior toy box in this series yet, but in the interior toy box you can use this toy to dynamically change the walls, the trim, the floors, and the light fixtures. So the list of choices that you're going to see in a moment will look differently if you're looking at this toy in the interior toy box. But the toy works exactly the same. So as we open the logic menu for this, the first thing you're going to notice is there are no properties. So this is all controlled with logic connections. And let's use our little button here and connect that up with a logic connection just so we can look at the behaviors for this toy. So as we open the menu for that, you'll notice there's 5 choices under here. You have the world theme, and this is basically the terrain themes and all the things that you can change with that. I'll look at that closer in a little moment. We have the rail slide pieces that are out of the platforming toys drawer, as well as the ledge hang pieces, which are in the platforming toys. You have the suburb pieces. These are the little house pieces that are in Building Sets Group 4, and I'll look at those in just a moment. And you have blocks, and these are the building blocks that are in the blocks drawer. So before we look at any of those, let me just show you where those are and what we're talking about. So world theme controls the terrain pieces, the customizable plants in the plants drawer, these first 9 clusters, and the racetrack pieces. Okay? All of those things are controlled with the terrain themes, and you've seen that if you've played around with the toy box too much. Every terrain theme comes with associated textures for racetrack pieces and plant clusters, not just the terrain. Those suburb buildings are building sets group 4. And if you scroll to the right, that's talking about these suburb homes, as well as the roofs. And then the blocks, of course, are the blocks out of the blocks drawer. So those are the pieces we're talking about. Oops. And again, you can go back to episode 3, and I showed you how to style all those things using the styling menus. So as we come back over to our button, new logic connection when pressed, and we get back to this menu. So under world theme, again, this is the terrain themes. And under here you have the terrain, you have the population clusters that are out of the plants drawer, and the racetrack pieces. If you open up terrain, these are all of the terrain themes. Okay? Unfortunately, they're not alphabetized. And another problem with this list that makes it a little bit difficult is when you put down a toy box customization power disk for a terrain theme, unlike other toys, which creates a little category for you called hexagonal power disks, where you can find those, this doesn't do that. It dumps the same theme into this same list. And again, it's not alphabetized. So before the video started, I put my Dinosaur World power disk down. It's not at the top of the list, and you have to scroll a little ways. And it's buried in the list. So it can be kind of tough to find. For the population clusters, it's the exact same names for the terrain themes, okay? And that can be a little bit confusing because if you look at the styling menu for the plant clusters, we'll look at this one. This was Fantasy Terrain 4 out of the drawer. But if you look at the list here and you scroll over and, for example, you find the Colby terrain, you're not going to find Colby in that list. Colby is actually the desert theme. That's the name of the terrain theme that goes with that. Oops. And so it can be a little bit confusing to find the terrain theme that matches up with the population clusters when it's not using the name that you see in the styling menu for the population clusters under here. It's using the terrain theme. So this is actually desert landscape. That's what you'll find instead of Colby. So that can be a little bit confusing. And the same is true for the racetrack pieces. The names of in the styling menu for the racetrack pieces are different than what you see here. You're always going to see the terrain theme name here. So you kind of need to know what goes with what. So you might have to do a little experimenting to figure it out for some of these. Now, world theme is everything that the terrain themes customize. If you look at the rail slides, these are all the themes that are available in the styling menu for the rail slides. And you'll notice that those don't line up with the terrain themes, which is why they're in their own separate menu. And the same is true for the suburb pieces. Those are the styles available for that. The ledge hang pieces, and the blocks in the blocks drawer. Now, this menu is organized by release version. Most people are not going to know what version a particular block style was released in, so you're just going to have to kind of scroll through the list, unfortunately. And that's a shame because these are difficult to find. They're not alphabetized, and it doesn't necessarily make sense, so you'll have to do a lot of scrolling in here to find the theme you're looking for. But they're all here, I believe. So you can use this to change all of those things. Yeah, okay, just double checking my notes to make sure I didn't skip anything. So now that we know what this toy does, let's try it out. And we're going to use it in our mission to change Mickey's world from a video game back to his real world, quote unquote. And, well, it's real for him. And so we're going to need a few other toys to make that happen. So let me pick this up and put it down to get us back to the Creativitoys drawer. And we're going to put down, we already have an action enforcer, I think. Well, let's put one down anyway. Now that I think about it, I don't think I do in this toy box. So we're going to need that for the end of our mission. I want to put down a few time delayers. And the reason for these is just because we don't want all of these events to happen right on top of each other. What I want to have happen is when Clue enters that trigger area, we're going to take Clue out and take the player out of the remote controller, which turns off that camera. And we're going to give it a second to do that before we have the player celebrate and we play our end of mission sound. And we're going to give it a few seconds for that to play. And then we're going to kick off the theme transformer and the sky changer to change Mickey's world back. And we're going to turn on a camera up above that we're going to place in a moment that will allow us to watch that. And so all of those things are kind of spaced out. You don't want to have all those things happening at the same time, which is why we have these time delayers in here just to kind of space it all out. We're going to need a couple of logic gates, and I'll explain these in a moment. We'll put one here. We'll take this button out because we don't need that now. And we'll put another one here. Alright, we already have the theme transformer and the sky changer. And I think that is it. The sound effect generator we put down in an earlier video. So all we need now is the target camera and a locator to connect that to. And what I want to do is place the target camera in such a way that we can kind of see most of the world. I want to be able to see the sky, I want to see the roads, the plants, the terrain. I want to be able to watch it so we can see when everything changes. And so let me pull up my screen grab here to make sure I put these things in the right places. So let's go up to the blocks drawer, and we're going to put down a few blocks just to help us put the camera in the right spot. We'll use this tall block to start with. We're going to place this in the middle of the road, and I'm going to count over from the end here. So this will be number 1. Let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and a half. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and a half. So we're going to put this block here, and we're going to stack up 5 of these. 3, 4, 5, one little block on top of that, and we'll put our camera on top of that. That puts it in the same place that I had it in my original toy box that I demoed. That just lets us see all of these things. And then we're going to put down a locator where we want that camera to look. And we're going to place this way out here on the ground like that. Okay? Alright. While we're up here, let's go ahead and set up our camera before we go back down below the terrain. So on the camera properties, most everything under here is fine. I'm going to turn glow through off. The camera target is going to be the connected locator. And we will do a new locator connection and connect up to that locator. And again, this is the placement of this and the camera is important because it's going to allow us to see all the things we want to see. Okay. So back under here. So on the trigger area, we've already got this hooked up last time to remove the friend and take the player out of the remote controller. So we'll leave those things. one more thing we want to do is start the first time delayer. So when entered by AI friend, we'll go and invoke our first time delayer. And the default delay of 1 second on this toy is fine. That's what it's set to in the properties by default, as we've seen in the past. Excuse me. So when this happens, we've given a second for the camera to turn off. The player is now standing up on the remote controller, and the regular player camera has kicked back in. And so now we can go ahead and have the player celebrate. And there's a couple things we normally do for that. When the delay is completed here on the time delayer, we come to the action enforcer and have all the players celebrate. And I also play my standard end of mission sound. So new logic connection when the delay is completed on that time delayer. We'll come up here to our sound effect generator. And we can reuse this. And under the musical category, it will have it play the fanfare sound. And then we'll kick off the next time delayer. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Now this time delayer, we're going to set the properties on this to 3 seconds. That'll give 3 seconds for the musical flourish to play, to watch Mickey celebrate. And then when this time delayer goes off, we'll initiate our change. Okay? So we'll do a new logic connection from this time delayer when the delay is completed. First thing we're going to do is come to the sky changer. And we can connect to this with a logic connection. And we can use this to change the sky. So the options that are under here, we have change sky, which will change it to what we have set in the properties. And we haven't set anything in here because we just dropped this. Or we can change it to a specific sky or a random one. We're going to use a specific one from Disney Infinity 1.0, and I'm going to change it to the Dragon's Flight Sky. Got all those sounds from those pendulums in the background. So that's how you can use a logic connection to change the sky dynamically. Next thing we want to do is start changing the world. So on the time delayer, the middle one here, new logic connection, when the delay is completed, we're going to come to our theme transformer. We're going to go to world theme, to the terrain, and I'm going to change this to be the through the looking glass terrain. This is the Alice in Wonderland terrain theme that was introduced right near the end of the release for this, along with the Morro Bay Seascape. If you don't have this, any grassy theme will do. But this is the one I like because it kind of matches the video game one, but it looks a little bit more realistic. Alright, now that just takes care of the terrain. We also need to change the roads and these plant clusters. Okay? So we need to make a couple more connections to the theme transformer. So we come to our time delayer, new logic connection when the delay is completed, and you'll notice it will not let me select that because I've already connected my time delayer to that toy. And so that's why I have 2 logic gates here, is we can use these as a pass-through to get to the theme transformer. So this logic gate will do an input, and then on the logic menu for this logic gate, a new logic connection on output. We'll come over to our theme transformer. Under the world theme, we'll go to population clusters. And for this one, we're going to use the Dragon's Domain. That's the theme that I chose. And then back to our middle time delayer here, we'll do a new logic connection. When the delay is completed, we'll go to this logic gate and do an input. and a new logic connection on output. Go to our theme transformer, to the world theme, to the racetrack pieces. This is what I'm using for the roads. And this time we're going to use Toy Box Terrain. This will change it to the Toy Box roads. Okay. And the other thing we want to do is start our camera up top so that we can see it. So on this timed layer, a new logic connection when the delay is completed. We will come up to our target camera up here and activate it because we want to watch all of this happen. Now in the properties for this, I would have loved to use define duration, but the display duration only goes to 10 seconds. And it takes at least 25 seconds on my Wii U, almost closer to 30, to be able to watch everything transform. And so I can't really use that because it doesn't leave the camera on long enough. And that's why we have our third time delayer here. And so this time delayer, we're going to set this to 28 seconds. That should be long enough to see most everything. And we're going to use this to turn off the camera when that's done. So the other thing this time delayer needs to do is it starts changing the world and the sky, turns on that camera, and then we also need to activate this third time delayer. And when this time delayer goes off, then we can deactivate the camera. Okay, so that's what the time delayers do and how they space everything out. And it's a good idea to use these things to do that. If you kind of figure out what you want to have happen, and in order in which they happen, then you can determine how many time delayers you need and kind of set the delay times on those to space things out so everything doesn't happen right on top of each other. And again, that can be important. Okay, so that, I believe, is everything for the logic. Oh, one more thing I want to do. I'm going to pick up one of these logic gates and put it down. The other thing we did not do last time is when Clue entered that trigger area, it left at least one of these wind toys on, the weather vanes on. And we want to turn those off. So I'm going to come over to our trigger area here. New logic connection when entered by AI friend. And I could do 4 connections and take that directly to the weather vanes, but I'm going to go through this logic gate to do that because I need to do those same things again next time. So this will save some logic connections. So I'll only make one from the trigger area over there, and this will connect up to the other 4. So on output from here, we want to make sure we come over to each of the weather vanes and turn them off. It's just a good cleanup thing to do. And next time we're going to handle the failure condition. What happens when Clue gets knocked off of the maze and falls to his death. And when that happens, we need to turn these off as well. And so by connecting the logic gate up for that, and having this turn off all of those weather vanes, I only have to make one logic connection to each of the trigger areas. The one that we've got over the ending point, and the one that we're going to put down next time underneath our maze. Okay, so there we go. Now before we test this out, it's really important to save your toy box, all right? Because once the theme transformer goes, it's going to change everything in this toy box. So you want to make sure you save this before you test it. And so we're going to come down. This is the one I loaded up. This is the other one, my other backup. So we'll use that one. I kind of alternate between the two. We'll go ahead and let that save. And then we'll try this out. Okay, so we hack the terminal. And here we go. That brings down the force field. And before we do this, I want you to notice I've got a number of terrain themes in here. So you'll remember when we did the build exercise for this toy box, I'm using the frosted white world for the terrain here. I'm using the video game texture for most of the rest of the toy box. And I'm using the Tron theme underneath our pinball games. And you can probably guess what's going to happen, but I want you to see this. Alright, so here we are. Let's go ahead and move our townsperson through the maze. Oh, got a little too close to that again. And there we go. So it kicks us out. Now we celebrate. And now we get to watch our world change. So the sky changed. Although we don't really see that. Now you're seeing the terrain change. The plants are starting to change. It takes a while to do all of that. And now the roads are changing. And there we go. And you'll see it changed our sidewalks to this grassy texture. Because it doesn't discriminate. It changes every piece of terrain in the toy box. It changes every plant cluster. So the fact that we had those set to different things doesn't matter. They are all now the same thing. Okay, so let me load up the toy box and I'll show you something you can do about that. Okay, I've reloaded the toy box, and of course first thing I need to do is come over here and push the button so I can get back into the editor. Okay, now you saw it change all of the terrain, but again you'll notice I was using a white theme for the sidewalks in town. I was using different colors for the base of the pinball games, both here and over here. And I did that not only to make that easier to see when you're playing the game, but I did that knowing that the theme changer was going to change all of that, because I wanted to show you that that happens. And so that didn't catch me by surprise. I knew that would happen. And so what you can do is you can come up to the blocks drawer, and this is really about the only way to get around this problem, is you need to use like the floor blocks, the large floor or the small floor, and use these for the surfaces that you want to be different. And so for this one, for example, we can set this, if we style it to be the concrete theme, I'll set that to be my theme. Oop, there we go. And so basically, everywhere I'm using that frosted white texture, you would place this down and build essentially your sidewalk. All right. And then over underneath the pinball games, you can do the same thing. So we can come up here to this, If we change this to something blue that kind of matches what we have under there, maybe the frozen, we'll set that to be the theme there. And we use that to build our floor for that game. And we choose something different for over here. And we do that over there. Then when we transform the world, because we're not changing the blocks, we're only changing the terrain, the population clusters, and the roads, the block textures will remain the same. And so this will continue to look like a sidewalk after we change the world. And that'll continue to look like ice underneath here, even after we change the world. Now obviously, if you're going to have your theme transformer change blocks as well, then this isn't going to work. But since we're not doing that, that's the only way to keep the area under here from not changing, is to do the floor with blocks instead of terrain. So I wanted you to see that and be aware of it. And that may not be the best texture, but you get the idea. I don't want to spend a lot of time scrolling through that list and finding a texture that will work. You can pick one for whatever you think that you would like. But that's it for the theme transformer. Next time we're going to finish up this mission and this toy box by implementing the logic for what happens if Clue dies before he can reach the end of the maze. And for that we're going to need a new toy, the checkpoint, and that'll be the lesson topic for next time. Until then, I want to thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my video today. The Theme Changer is a pretty powerful toy, and if you want to see another example of this toy in action, you can watch my Halloween Takeover video from 2019. This is the toy that I used in that video to change Disneyland into Halloween Town and back. That's all for me today. Take care and have a great weekend.